Hello my friends, hope you're all well. I have a little story for you. It's called Independence. Irish author, playwright and political activist George Bernard Shaw said, "Independence, that's middle class blasphemy. We're all dependent on one another, every soul of us on earth." On the other hand, former President of the USA said of the UN, "It is designed to make possible lasting freedom and independence for all its members." So who's right? Well, of course, independence of an individual is different from independence of a nation. Isn't that true? But what we do know is that independence from God is a total disaster, and if anybody wants to argue with us about that, let them look at the state of this world as it moves further and further away from God. But sometimes a person can have a belief system that makes them feel they've got to be so independent that it gets to the point of foolishness. And my little story, a true story, concerning Kate and myself and another individual, just illustrates that point. For a few years, Kate and I lived back in England, not far from where I came from, because we went to look after my mother when she was bereaved, when my father died. And we set up a window cleaning round, and much of our cleaning was in a small Somerset town, and this particular morning we were cleaning windows at a row of 3-storey buildings, quite high, quite hard work, and each house took quite a long time. And as we passed between the houses, me with the ladder and bucket and Kate with her equipment, steps and other equipment, a young girl in her early 20s was standing looking at the back of a car, and I noticed she'd got a flat tyre. She opened the boot, and I presumed she was going for the spare wheel. And I said, "Do you want my help?" She gave me a withering look as if I'd totally insulted her, and made it very clear she could manage without the help of a man. So we cleaned the windows at the next house, and then the next house, and the next house. We did the fronts, and then we went round to the backs and did the backs, because they were in a terrace of houses. When we came back round, some time later, she was still trying to get the jack under the car. And then when we came back round from the backs again, this young lady was struggling now to try and undo the wheel nuts, and she couldn't manage. They'd probably been put on with an air wrench in a garage, and she couldn't get them off. We went across the road, and by the time we'd done 2 or 3 other houses over there, she was still struggling. So I went and asked her again, did she want my help? And she just completely ignored me. So we went and did the backs of those houses and came round the corner again, just in time. Probably a time of 2 or 2.5 hours had passed, and a taxi arrived, and she got in the taxi. Now that seems sad to us. I mean, I have to admit, Kate and I laughed. She was obviously some kind of woman's liberation lady, and she thought to take my help, for me to offer help, made me some kind of enemy in that situation. We laughed, but when we got home and talked about it, it was quite sad too, wasn't it? I mean, does she think that I feel I can be independent of women? When I was up those 3 stories cleaning those top windows, quite a lot of the places the ground was uneven, wasn't very stable, it wasn't a great place for a ladder. So Kate was at the bottom of the ladder with her foot on the ladder. My life was dependent on her. She used to jokingly say, "That's the time to ask for an increase in the housekeeping." But I would have been lost without Kate in that situation. And all us men, if we're honest, we know we wouldn't even be here. We were born to a woman, for goodness sake. Obviously we have to be dependent on women. I've long thought about the difference of the roles between a man and a woman, and it's not very obvious in the sense of what we're capable of. I mean, for instance, most of us men tend to think the women make the best cooks, and we perhaps do a barbecue and make a hash of it, and our wives turn up lovely meals every day. If I cook, it's never the same as Kate's to look at, and it's certainly never the same to the taste either. And yet some of the world's top chefs, they're men. So that kind of knocks that theory on the head a bit, doesn't it? Also, us men can perhaps assume that we're the better drivers. But actually, I don't know about the rest of the world, but the statistics here in Ireland and the UK suggest the opposite. that men, and especially young men, are much more likely to be reckless, cause accidents, than young women are, or than women in general. In fact, I think a while ago some of the insurance companies were offering women a better deal because of that very reason, that they were less of an accident risk than us men were. So what are the differences then? Well, it might just be my opinion, and maybe you wouldn't agree. But I think that women, when it comes to the gentle, tender, caring side of things, are better than us men, generally speaking, more sensitive, generally speaking. Also, when it comes to some very fine work, I think that women can do fine work better than men. Maybe it's because they've got smaller fingers, generally speaking, but I don't know. So what are men good for? Well, I suppose we've got our uses, haven't we, men? We're good at protecting, we're good at being there when there's a need for strength, as there was in that situation with the changing of this young lady's wheel. This young lady was maybe late for work or an important appointment. Perhaps she wasn't going anywhere special, although the very fact that she went to the expense of getting a taxi, and taxis aren't cheap in the west of England, would seem to suggest that she had to get to where she was going. It wasn't something she could just put off. And what did she do? Why did she refuse my help? All to prove a point which actually she failed to prove. So I guess it's a lesson for all of us in that, isn't it? I was strong and fit in those days, not like now when I'm suffering this chronic fatigue syndrome. I had a really good jack in the boot of my car. I also had a powerful wheel wrench that meant you could get really good leverage. So no matter how tight the wheel nuts were on, I would have been able to get them off for her. I think that 10 minutes maximum and I would have had her on the road. But her belief system saw me as a male a threat in a situation where I could help. But what was her threat to? I can't quite work that out. We hope she's adapted her view since then. She was probably in her mid-20s or something, maybe her early 20s, and that was probably about 16 or 17 years ago. But it's a reminder to us all here. We like to be a bit independent. We're encouraged really to carry our own load in things, but sometimes things come along and they're a burden. Maybe nowadays with my health I have to ask people sometimes to help me with a heavy load that I could have carried on my own once. Sometimes we need help with perhaps something that's mental or spiritual that affects us. A burdensome thing. We should cry out for help. Or if somebody sees our need and comes and offers us help, surely we should take it. We're not creatures in isolation, are we? We're all needed. Men, women, children, older folk, younger folk. Everybody's got their place wherein they can help. But the truth is, things only work when we work at them together. And that's a nice thought, isn't it? Just a little true story. Sometimes I look back on things that have happened, maybe you do the same, and I think, yeah, there's a little lesson in there. If you think it round a little bit, you come up with something that seems to make sense. Love and peace to you, my friends. Hope everybody's well, and talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.